Okay, so here's a little bit of a run through on the new stuff happening on our new 650, 700, 725 models for 2022. We're just about to start on some of these 725s. One is a diesel and one is an outboard. So this is the outboard powered hull here. One of the first changes you notice that we've done is we've gone flat across the back here. We're not doing the cutout like some of our boats have had in the past. Main reason for that is we just want a bit more room inside the unit here. We're going to be able to get a couple of batteries. Yeah, so we'll be able to get two batteries in the transom with the power steering unit. One over next to the tuner tubes, and then one here. That'll be quite good because it means we don't have to. If they don't have tuner tubes, we can put both batteries here, but it does give us the option to put one over to the left-hand side just to even the weight out a little bit more. And then if we do have tuner tubes, we've got room for two batteries plus power steering unit in there as well. In the past, we've been having to put the power steering unit up by the driver's side, but some of them can be quite noisy, so this will give us just enough room for that. Offsetting the tuner tubes, because when we're putting them in the middle, sometimes if guys run them on a bait board as well, then it's over the top of the tuner tubes, which can be a bit of a pain. And we have also standardized some of the stuff, so I'll put some rigging tubes in. They'll run through the transom, and then another tube for trim tabs and potentially transducers depending on the size of the plug. But definitely live bait tank pumps, underwater lights, things like that. And maybe not even at the time the manufacture, these pipes will be in, so the customers want to fit some of the stuff aftermarket, then it's really easy for them to do it. Obviously the bigger tube is taken up with all the rigging going to the engine, but this is a 38mm tube that customers can use if they want to retrofit stuff easily without having to cut holes in the transom. All the holes for grommets and stuff, normal stuff, are all pre-cut with grommets and things, which makes it easy. Obviously just all trim tabs to go on here. Streamline the ladder brackets a little bit. They're now built into the brace. So they are, it used to be just a little bracket that went on the back, but now that's all built into the brace. So sometimes we found that when the braces went through, if the guys weren't careful, they didn't line up, then you could create a bit of a weak spot in the face on the back because it was sort of twisting it a little bit if the brace didn't line up smack on with the ladder bracket. So now it does, and we're putting a small notch into the boarding platform so that they have to end up in the same place every time, which makes it easy for like UDEC kits and things. And if customers want to retrofit those kits themselves later on, they can buy one from us and know that it'll go straight on. The little modules with the surge tanks for when you're filling your fuel tank now, they're all pre-drilled for fuel filters and switch panels and fuses and things, and that's a separate panel that can be unbolted and then bolted in separately, so it's all tidy and there's room in behind it for wiring, even with the tuner tubes. And then putting in some bars that you can tie the loom to, so the thought is it can come around the corner, straight up through the hole, down the bar, and then through these grommet holes here, and then straight into the rigging hoses, and it's all nicely supported up high above your batteries. We don't have tags welded in the transom that can cause weld marks because the pipe doesn't actually contact any of the sheet metal, so you don't end up with any weld distortion. And it's a nice solid bar with good support too. You don't run the risk of breaking the tags off down the track. So all the tuner, it's not showing, but the live bait tanks all pre-cut and the kits and things as well, so they can be a little bit more standardized. We've put in folded panels for there, so you can run. It's all pre-made for binnacle controls. Some of the side mount remotes we were finding when that panel ran straight through, if you had them at say 3/4 throttle, it pinched up the space between your knee and the throttle. So by having the binnacle control up on top, we can negate that problem a little bit. Just keep going around the boat here. Things we've changed. We've changed the fear lead on the front. We've recessed it down now. I just think it looks a little bit tidier than the big fear leads that used to stick up, but also the cabin tops are flatter than what they used to be. They don't curve as much because it helps to get the hatches to seal better. But what that can do when they're a bit flatter sometimes is if the anchor bites into the roll a little bit when you pull the anchor up, when the cabin is flat, there's not a lot of angle there, and occasionally anchors were getting stuck and people were having to go forward and push the anchors off. But by recessing that, we can put just a little bit more angle on the anchor, which is going to help it to deploy a bit easier. Brackets are all in there for if you want to fit drum winches or that sort of thing. What else have we got? So you can see with the new bunk frames, this is something we've brought through from the 750s. The bunk frame edges, there's a bit of work in this, but we can bring them right out to the edge of the boat, and it helps to kind of seal off some of that bow noise underneath the squabs when there's not a big gap. We run some seal around there too, which helps to stiffen and brace up the side skins. Change some of the floor to slots instead of holes, a little bit less distortion, sort of clicking in the floor that we run into on the odd occasion. One of the things that we've done, which might be better viewed in this one, some changes to the fuel tank. So we brought this down from the bigger boats. The chamber under the fuel tank is completely sealed off. So from the footwell back, there's a drain tube that runs under the fuel tank and drains into the bilge area. But it means that this is now the floor over the fuel tank is welded off. The fuel tank still floats separate. It's not a part of the structure of the boat. So if you've got any slight twisting motion or anything through the boat, it's not going to get that relayed to the fuel tank, which might cause it to crack over time. But these here will have little skirts that come up and extend these pipes up above it, and then so this has got a tube welded around it, and then the fuel tank floats inside that, and it's sealed between the two, but it effectively creates a whole sealed compartment underneath the fuel tank, which means that you shouldn't have to worry about any corrosion down there 10 years from now where you can't really get to it to clean it properly. Another thing, we haven't quite started with it yet, but coming up shortly we'll have these little stoppers in the fuel filler, so that will mean that people shouldn't slow your filling down, but it means that people can't run a hose into your fuel tank to siphon fuel out of it, especially with bloody $3 a litre or whatever it is now, or close to it. Changed the fuel tanks a little bit, added some extra baffles. We did have one customer that had some issues where there wasn't quite enough baffles in their tank, and if they really plant it and take off, sometimes fuel surge can come out through the filler. So extra baffles in the tanks, and then the lid has got these slots cut in them and then welded onto the top of the baffles, which we used to have just the baffles, but I've just added those because that's a requirement for survey, and if it's in survey it's there for a reason, so we might as well add it to our production boats as well. Another thing we've added in the hull structure is just this last bar, because we have widened the number one stringers up quite a lot. That's probably one of the other changes I should mention is the 725 here has 4 stringers each side, and you can see all the cross members running through it as well, which line up with the structure that supports the tank. But I was doing some homework and found through a mate that the ISO standard for structure in the hull is no more than, I think it's 250 mils on the diagonal, which these are well inside. These stringers we run, they're only 200 mils apart, so they're well inside of that. But when we've widened up the number one stringer to get bigger fuel tank volumes into these boats, it meant that we were a little bit more than that. So I haven't run it all the way to the back of the boat. I don't kind of see the point, really. We've had this system out here without this brace in it for years and haven't had any trouble. But and this whole setup actually meets survey without this brace in it. But hey, a boat can never be too strong, too stiff. Proves the ride, all that sort of thing. So we've added in some of these braces run through too, which gets the bow of the boat back to ISO standards, and just adds a bit more beef. Not showing here too is there's a keel bar that runs all the way through the boat as well, but that's something that guys just drop in. That doesn't cut in the kit, so there is a 50 by 12 keel bar that runs down through the middle of that too. Good chine support. We've extended some of these stringers down so that the chines are really well supported. You can see they all perfectly match up, and they pretty much come how this design software is too, like they're within a half a mil of touching. Lifted the floor height up a little bit to get the fuel volume in there too. So now we're getting, whereas before we were struggling to get to 200 litres in the 650 models if it was all fuel, now we're getting 650 hardtop is 280 litres of fuel with fuel storage, with storage compartment in front of that. This one's showing obviously all fuel tank, but we've got an option to finish this short. So if we have a storage section, we make that about 700 mils long, which is long enough to store dive bottles with the valves on, obviously with the valves on. So now if you have that storage compartment that's big enough for fuel tanks in a 650, you'll get 280 litres. Without the storage, it's 360 litres. So that's an increase. It's nearly doubled. It's an extra 160 litres in the 650. And the reason I specifically want to do it in the 650 is because our boats are big. So like, you know, our 650 is the same size as like a 695 Extreme or a 700 Surtees or whatever. But their fuel tank volumes were more than ours, even though our boats were a similar size. So I wanted to bump that fuel tank volume up so that we compete spec-wise with their bigger models, you know, right across the board on everything. 700 Souwesters and the new models will now take 320 litres of fuel with storage, or 400 litres without storage. And then the 725, which is what this model is here that I'm showing you on the screen, that will do 360 odd litres of fuel with storage, or 440 litres with no storage. So big fuel tank volumes, huge increases in fuel. Yeah, so what else have we got changed? Whole dash layout is new. So the dash layout that we rolled over from the old boats used to have a bigger cluster on the top, and that was put in there with screens on a sloping face because the engines always used to come with a set of gauges when that was set up. You know, it'd be a couple of SmartCraft gauges, or like it might be a couple of analog gauges, two big ones with some small ones. That's kind of all gone out the window now, and it's all back to just you know, one little 4 or 5 inch screen for the engine, which we're envisaging will probably go in this face next to the steering wheel. And now what we're trying to do is we've got room for like a 19-inch screen on the dash if you wanted to go that big, or it will take two 12s. Not two 12s with buttons. You could do like two Garmin, say 8412s, or like a Simrad Go series with an NSS Evo 3, which is, you know, one set of buttons but not two. Won't quite fit. And just bring the steering wheel out to you, a bit more knee clearance than the old one has. Switches on a vertical face, a little bit easier to see. A lot of that stuff now is all just pre-cut. So if you want to add a switch panel later on, you know, you just nick out the parts that you want through the carpet. You don't make anywhere near a big of a mess, or it gives us some opportunity to still be able to customize switch positions to people. Because obviously some of the guys want like wiper switches and things back where the remote is, which does a good job. And then we put some cup holders in as standard. And then glove box is quite a bit bigger. We've sort of tried to bring that, I've tried to bring that further forward, because when you end up with the two seat boxes sitting next to each other, the handrail's frequently too far away to be useful for the passenger. So I've just pulled that back a little bit so that it's hopefully something that's a bit more reachable for the passenger when they're sitting in their seat if it gets a bit rougher. All of the dash panels are in the kit, and because this was getting quite big deep for a glove box, I made the dash panel so that it's like a separate little box to lift the bottom of it up that sort of screws into place to cover that off. But it means you get like a cool little cubby there that's accessible from in the cabin, where you might be able to chuck some stuff that you don't want in the salt spray so much. Might be somewhere, you know, you can chuck some phones or maybe first aid kit, so it's something quick to get at, that sort of thing. Another thing we get asked about is, you know, people that want to shift seat boxes backwards and forwards and stuff like that to make them fit. So we're trying to sort of standardize that a little bit. I mean, obviously the whole seat module is custom, but the distance from the dash, we're trying to make that a bit more standardized for the guys. So we're going to cut these plates and add in, they'll have threaded rods between them, helm attaches to the plate, and so all the new boats coming out will have adjustable helm distances. So instead of moving the seat in and out, you can adjust the helm in and out, which will be pretty cool for the guys that want to be, you know, a little bit further away or close to the steering wheel, or maybe your dad bod's gone a bit far and you need a bit more belly clearance, then we can do that there with the steering wheel. Changed the way that some of the folding dashes work just to make the hinges a bit more robust and built into the bunk framing. Footrests have gotten a little bit wider, so you don't feel like you can having to hold your knees together so much. The dash width in here has got a little bit narrower. That's what the standard dash was back to here. Partly that's because of the two screens fitting a bit easier. I'm also trying to keep the gap down narrow enough so if we want to do a sliding door, we can get that across without having to cut clearance into the gunnel and clear the chine like we've had to in the past, which it gets a little bit more complicated, which means that we can fit that stuff a little bit easier and hold prices for a little bit longer, that sort of thing. So that's the dash layout. I think that's probably, obviously the whole boat is new, so we've flattened out the shear line. So in the older boats, this used to be tapered and then come through and then taper off towards the front. So all parallel with the floor line, which means things like live bait tanks are much easier to trim in because you're not trying to trim them into a wedge. They trim in parallel. So I think they look a bit nicer when they're flat too. This is again going along the lines of what the 750 and the 8 metre are. We've got a steeper dead rise on the front. We've pulled the keel line down a little bit so that we can make sure we got some more flotation in the front to lift the front to make sure the floor's got fall in it. But that's meant that our dead rise in the bow has gotten quite a lot sharper than what it has been previously. And then I've dropped a bit of width out of the chine in the front shoulders just to try and soften them up a little bit for that quartering sea. We don't want to go too crazy because we're a hull that rides really nicely in a following sea, and we don't want to lose that. But we think that we can, just soften it up a little bit without compromising that following sea performance. Still a decent bit of chine back here, but it used to get wider. It used to be wider up in this section, and then taper off a little bit more. So I've just kind of pulled the chine back so it's a little bit wider, a little bit further back, and not quite so wide in the shoulder, and then tapers through a bit finer. You can see how much structure is under the floor in these things. It's quite a bit. So I think that's most of the changes. Like I say, big one is fuel tank volumes. Also the cabins and stuff have gotten quite a bit wider. The walk-around's a little bit narrower, but I have pushed the hull width out a little bit up here. So now I think we're about 1925 inside the gunnel, whereas the old models used to be 1800, so it's over 100 mils wider inside the boat. And that's mostly just so we can have a lot more common parts across the models. And guys, then wheelhouse options, potentially even with tables and chairs and things, if you can deal with the length, but the width-wise, that becomes a reality right down to the 650, depending on how much cockpit space you want to compromise lengthwise. But that's a lot of the things. Cutting in also windscreen wipers and stuff, so if you don't want to do that at the time, the holes are all pre-cut for if you want to fit them aftermarket, save a lot of time. So we've just been sort of going through everything, and obviously the price of materials has gone up, and all that has increased a lot. So we thought, while we have to put the price of the boats up, what can we do to add some features and make the boats a bit cooler, and give you some money back, not money back, but give you some more value for money with the price increases that we're getting. The things we're doing are making the boats faster for us to build, but they're adding features at the same time. Another one there is extra rod holders. So they used to have 6. Now they're all getting 9 across the roof because we've got brackets in there that the guys no longer have to hand make, and that offsets the cost of adding an extra rod holders. So just trying to add value, so it's not just all cost increases with the boat. So that's the new stuff for 650, 7 metre, 725. Some of that's coming down from 750s and 8 metres. Some of that is new stuff in this design that's going to go up into the other models. If you got any questions, drop them in the comments and let me know, and I can maybe answer them in there, or if it looks like I've missed anything that you've seen that you've noticed. If you want to see any more of this sort of stuff, then let me know what it is that interests you. Even if it's a bit more maybe into the hull characteristics of how I think that they work and why we design them the way we do, or any of those sorts of questions, then let me know, drop me a comment, and tell me what else you want to see, and I'll do some more videos. Thank you. See ya.